Hello, and welcome to this first video to accompany the AMSP Further Maths Conference Student Use of Technology for Studying Matrices session. In this first video, we're going to look at multiply matrices. We'll look at how you can multiply matrices on a graphical and scientific calculator, and we'll also look at a teaching activity you could use in the classroom. So, here's an example of a product students might be expected to find. I'm just going to work through this with pen and paper first. So, I'm going to set this out in a way you might not be familiar with this way of setting it out. You might have your own way of setting it out, but I would use a cross to split the page into a grid. I would write the left-hand matrix bottom left, 2, -1, 1, 3, and the right-hand matrix top right, 2, 4, -2, 0, 1, 2. And this is just a way of keeping track of what we're doing when we're finding the elements. To find this element, it's 2 times 2 plus -1 times 0, 4 plus 0 is 4. To find this element, 2 times 1 plus 3 times 0 is 2. And at each stage, I'm just looking at the rows and columns that intersect on the element in the product. So here, this element is the intersection of that column and that row. So it's 2 times 4 is 8, -1 times 1 is -1, that's 7. Similarly, 4 ones are 4, 3 ones are 3, 4 and 3 is 7. 2 lots of -2 is 4, -1 lots of 2 is 2, -2, so I've got -4, -2, which is -6, and finally 1 lot of -2 and 3 lots of 2 is 6, -2 and 6 is 4. So that gives me my answer for my matrix, which is 4, 7, -6, 2, 7, 4. Now let's have a look at doing this on a scientific calculator. Here's an example of the Casio 991EX Class Whiz. So on here, I would go to the matrices function. I would define my two matrices A and B. So press 1 to define matrix A. It's got 2 rows and 2 columns. And then I would type in the numbers here. You can see I've prepared this in advance. Option again to go back. 1 to define matrix, number 2 to define matrix B, and this is going to be 2 rows and 3 columns, and again you can see I've already defined 2, 4, -2 and 0, 1, 2. So now if I press option again to go back, I can do 3 matrix calculation and then option 3 matrix 1 multiplied by option 4 matrix B, and there is my product. Here's the same thing on a graphical calculator. So on the Casio CG50, I would use the run matrix mode. There are a couple of ways to define this. My preference is not to define them as matrix A and B as we did on the scientific, but just go straight into the math mode here, pick up the matrix option, and then I can say I want a 2 by 2 matrix, and I can type in my numbers 2, -1, 1, 3. And then similarly, I want an n by n matrix here. So it's got 2 rows and 3 columns. And there it is. And again, type in the values here, 2, 4, -2, 0, 1, 2, and there is my product. So once students know how to multiply matrices on their calculator, they can then move on to some classroom activities. They can try some exercises from the textbook, or they can try an activity like this one taken from the Integral Maths resources. So on this one, students are asked to try and find as many entries as they can in this grid here. So for example, we found this 2 by 2 by the 2 by 3 here. We found something that goes in here. I haven't quite spaced to write in that grid. You can print off a much bigger copy of this from the resources, but for example here we found our answer on our previous page, which was 2, -113 multiplied by 2, 4, -2, 0, 1, 2 was 476, -6, 274. Some of these won't be possible if the matrices aren't conformable, so if these were the other way round, the 2 by 3 was first, for example here, multiplied by the 2 by 2 here, that isn't possible. So the task for students is to practice using the multiplying matrices functions of their calculators to fill in as many of these cells as they can and identify which ones aren't conformable. Okay, so just to finish, we've contrasted a couple of things here, which is using a pen and paper method for matrix multiplication and use the matrix multiplication function on the calculator. They're expected to be able to do both of these. Question to leave you thinking about is, how do either of these methods, either complementary or on their own, help develop students' understanding of matrix multiplication? What is it about the pen and paper method that might help them understand what matrix multiplication is a bit more? And how does using a calculator to calculate these products directly help them understand it a bit more?